perspective I offer in this module is a dialectical one. It is essential that people preserve their culture, ethnicity, and language while becoming more cosmopolitan and global. While maintaining one's own language and culture has numerous advantages, it is also important to learn one or more global languages. Several languages dominate the world, including markets, medical research, and universities. Learning one or more of these languages can provide a huge advantage for an individual or country in this era of increasing globalization. English. English has clearly become the new lingua franca, the global language of business, mass media, science, sports, and education. English is the primary language of several of the most influential countries in the world, England and the United States. It is the primary language of Canada, Ireland, Scotland, Australia, New Zealand, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, of 2 Central and South American countries, of 20 African countries, in 20 countries in the Pacific, and of 15 Caribbean countries. But most importantly, it is the second language of Europe, Russia, China, Mexico, Central America, and South America. English is spoken by the majority of residents of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, Switzerland, Poland, Germany, Estonia, Slovenia, Croatia, Greece, Israel, Cyprus, and Argentina. Clearly, in business, science, trade, or education, not knowing English puts an individual or a country at a disadvantage in an increasingly global world. Scholarly journals, business contracts, negotiations, internet websites, news media, and international commerce is increasingly done in English. Even many extreme jihadist websites have an English version to facilitate their global reach. To acquire global knowledge and to play in the world economy, English is imperative. The low English proficiency of most Latin American countries is a barrier to economic, political, media, and scientific influence. It would benefit most countries greatly if they more uniformly taught Spanish and English in the schools. Spanish. Spanish is a global language and the leading language of the Western Hemisphere, and of course, Spain. Nearly 500 million people speak Spanish. It is the first language of every North American, Central American, South American country except for Canada, the United States, and Brazil. And in the United States, 40 million people speak Spanish, including almost 3 million non-Hispanics. Many Brazilians speak Spanish, or at least understand it. Most Caribbean countries speak Spanish, as well as the African countries of the Western Sahara and Equatorial Guinea. Many people in the Philippines speak Spanish, and it is making a comeback. Clearly, Spanish is an international language and can be used extensively to facilitate education, commerce, business, and politics throughout the Americas. French. While no longer the lingua franca that was once thought to be destined to be the world's language, French is still a global language. In addition to France, French is spoken in Quebec and much of Canada, in more than a dozen countries in Central and South Africa, in many Caribbean countries, in parts of Switzerland and Belgium, and in many Pacific Island nations. While not the global language many predicted at one time, anyone with international aspirations could profit by learning French. Chinese. Chinese, including Mandarin and South Chinese, is used by hundreds of millions of people in mainland China, Taiwan, and in much of Southeast Asia. Mandarin Chinese is spoken by a huge number of people, perhaps 800 million worldwide, which in sheer numbers makes it the most spoken language in the world. However, at the present time, it is currently more of a regional language than a global language, but this may change quickly. Though Chinese communities exist throughout the world, very few people speak Chinese in most non-Asian countries. While learning Chinese would be an important skill, it would not presently have the same global impact as English or Spanish. China, however, is increasingly important in Latin America. Since the turn of the century, trade between China and Latin America has increased by 1,500% and is particularly strong with Brazil, Mexico, Venezuela, Argentina, and Chile. China is now the largest export market in the world for Brazil, Chile, and Peru. In the future, learning Mandarin Chinese will have great benefits in business, science, government, and education. The massive size of the Chinese population and the huge economic progress they have made in the past few decades make it a huge and expanding player on the international scene. Many believe that learning Chinese will be the most important international skill of this century. In England, for example, schools are shifting away from foreign language instruction in French and German and moving to Mandarin Chinese. In the past decade, the United States enrollment in Chinese university classes has more than doubled. The rapidly expanding Chinese middle class have an insatiable desire for consumer goods, particularly prestige and luxury items from other countries. The ability to sell to China in the Chinese language represents an incredible opportunity for any business. That said, Chinese is a very difficult language to learn, with intonation patterns and characters that are unknown to and difficult for speakers of English or Spanish. And the Chinese are learning English much faster than the world is learning Chinese. Clearly, Chinese speakers are impressed by a foreigner that can speak or write Chinese. But the jury is still out on whether Chinese will become a truly global language. Russian. While the Russian language is the primary language of Russia and to some degree of the former republics of the Soviet Union, and is a major language, it is not a global one. Nonetheless, including Russia itself, there are nearly 300 million Russian speakers worldwide. Russian remains an important international language for a number of reasons. First, recent East-West tensions have made understanding Russian announcements and policies extremely important again. Second, Russian is a major language of science and technology, and not all Russian scientists speak or write in English or German. Third, despite recent economic problems in Russia and a Western trade embargo, Russia is a huge producer of natural resources and energy of all types, making it an international economic player. Finally, despite the focus on China and India as gigantic untapped markets, Russia, the largest country in the world geographically, is a huge potential future market. Corruption, an aging population, and lack of infrastructure may slow down economic progress in Russia, but it has one of the most educated populations in the world and a great hunger for consumer products. German. German is mostly a regional Central European language. 80% of German speakers live in Germany, with most of the rest in Austria, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and other nations adjacent to Germany, as well as in a few large cities around the world. Once an important language of science, it has mostly been replaced by English. German would be a useful language if you are working or studying in Central Europe, but its global impact is small. Arabic. Arabic is an old and important language. It is the primary language of the Arabian Peninsula, the Middle East, and North Africa. But Arabic is infrequently used outside of these countries. At the same time, few people from this region speak a second language, meaning that Arabic countries are increasingly isolated from the global conversation taking place in other nations. In a few Arabic countries, people speak English or French, and younger people in these countries are more likely to speak English. There is a danger that for the upper classes in some Arabic countries, English is replacing Arabic, which could be a problem for commerce and education in their own countries and the region. It is imperative that these countries that are adding English also retain Arabic to maintain regional connection while expanding globally. It is important to retain local knowledge and core competencies when seeking global knowledge to compete in an increasingly intertwined environment. The terms glocal and glocalization recognize the importance of both the local and the global. Global knowledge must recognize the unique competencies of each country and culture within the broader global community. The Scottish sociologist Roland Robertson has popularized the term glocalization to reference the combination of global and local that preserves and protects local products, language, culture, and practices. If globalization squashed local culture and innovation and imposed global homogeneity, we would all be worse off. Such is the case in Latin America. Clearly, Latin America has many products that are not available elsewhere in the world, or are poor imitations of Latin American products. Caribbean and Latin American food of many types, coffee, candy, liquor, such as rum and tequila, beer, music, leather, textiles, tourism, mining, building materials, construction, energy, and machinery are examples of local high-quality products that should be the focus of Latin American industry. Entering the global marketplace is advantageous, but not at the loss of what makes Latin America unique. Led by Mexico and Brazil, Latin American companies are slowly but surely establishing a global presence, with 9 companies from those 2 countries among the top 500 multinational companies in the world. For example, Cemex, the Mexican material and construction company, is a global company with a major presence in every continent. It has headline projects in Berlin, Germany, Sacramento, California, Marseille, France, Manzanilla, Panama, Manaus, Brazil, and Carinthia, Austria, to name but a few. Similarly, Embraer, the Brazilian aerospace company, has become transnational with a large presence and market in other countries for executive jets, military aircraft, agricultural planes, and commercial passenger jets. In addition to its native Brazil, Embraer has headquarters in China, France, Ireland, the Netherlands, Portugal, Singapore, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, and the United States. More than 100 airlines from 60 countries fly Embraer aircraft. Embraer is a huge presence globally and has embraced the global marketplace and provides a model of Latin American entry into global markets. But in general, Latin American and Caribbean companies have been slow to develop a global multinational presence. Almost no Latin American companies have made a majority of their profits outside of their borders. The United States has a very strong global presence economically. It is still the biggest economy in the world and perhaps the most stable one. However, given the extreme global presence of the United States, it should never lose focus on its local products and its core competencies: technological and medical innovation, telecommunication, computers, science, biotechnology, traditional and alternative energy, education, entertainment, art, cinema, music, tourism, agriculture, food, finance, aerospace, and automobiles, although most manufacturing will continue its 40-year decline. The world has contracted because of transportation, telecommunication, the internet, travel, and immigration. Though we speak different languages, we are all connected as never before. It is vital that individuals and organizations in each country recognize the fact that globalization is here. That realization should never obscure the profound importance of the local. Retaining local culture, language, customs, and products is imperative. Globalization and global competencies should not include the loss of culture and language of each region. Individuals, organizations, and communities must maintain their local identity as they participate and share in an increasingly globalized world. Thank you.